Right, morning. Welcome everybody. Friday, the 25th of February, 2021. Can you believe it? Eh? What happened to the last 12 months just disappeared, and the next 12 are probably going to go even faster. So we've got a choice. Do we react or do we respond? How do we actually deal with these fast-moving times and the fast changes and cats doing strange things on Zoom screens and all sorts of interesting things like that. So Lee, I got my tongue totally tied around trying to decipher your message here. What about your choice to respond or react? Do we have a choice? Do we choose to make this choice? What does it take to choose our response versus react? So yeah, definitely the juices are flowing and things are becoming interesting, and we're going to find out what everybody thinks about this. So react or respond. Lee, over to you. Morning, Alessia. Welcome back.
Morning.
Yeah, reaction and response. I'm going to start with a story. My daughter was innocently at a red traffic light, robot for those of you who are in South Africa, and a guy rode into the back of her. She's fine, he's fine, but her little Suzuki sort of bottom range vehicle had some pretty serious damage in the sort of the rear right side. So her insurance company said, well, you'd have to pay the excess if we do the claim on your behalf. So she said, no, fine, I will do the claim and through his insurance. So of course he had to do a certain amount of admin, and it took her easily a month for him to put the claim in, and so that she could have a claim number. I'm talking about the end of November. And then the insurance company that she was dealing with, his insurance company, just never got back to her. She called, she emailed every day up until the middle of February. And eventually she discovered that there was only one person who was responsible for her claim, and that person was on leave for 3 weeks during the time that her claim was now in the process. So when she discovered this, so now she's discovered there is a person that she can talk to. And it's now over 2.5 months, and her car still, she doesn't know if they're even going to pay, what the story is. She's been driving this broken car. She chose very, very deliberately, when she first spoke on the phone to this lady on the other end, on the insurance company, to ask about her holiday, to find out how she was. And this lady went on and told her what an amazing holiday it was and how fantastic it was. And my daughter's telling us over the lunch table the story, and my mom turns around and she says, you know what? You can sometimes be too nice. I mean, this person has just, she's inconvenienced you, and you must lay down the law and say, no, come on, get sorted. And Alyssa looked at her and said, Gran, I want this lady to remember me. And I want, when she sees that I'm calling or it's my email, I want her to have such a positive response to who I am, that she will do what I want her to do. It was a lesson in response from my 28-year-old daughter. And so I think that's really what I wanted to say, is that we can choose our response, and we can do it deliberately in order to change the reaction that we get from other people to our favor. Yeah, let's leave it there.
Thanks, Lee. Well, yeah, I think your daughter would be very disappointed in me because I did the exact opposite not so long ago. I had some fun and games with the bank during the course of last year, and after many phone calls and many emails, I eventually got hold of some poor lady in a call center somewhere, and I said to her, you know, I need to get this sorted out, and but let me explain to you what's happened. And she kept on interrupting me. She would not let me finish a sentence. And I tried a number of times, you know, very calm, very deliberate. You know, I need to explain to you, this is not the first time I've called.
Oven.
Yeah.
Oven.
Yeah, no, shut up. And eventually that's what I said to her. I actually screamed down the phone and I told her to shut up, and totally lost my cool. And guess what? My problem was solved in 4 hours. Something that had taken nearly 2 months to get resolved. 4 hours later was 100% sorted. I did apologize to her afterwards, but it sometimes takes the opposite reaction. And it's not often that I lose my cool like that. But yeah, sometimes it's necessary. And as you've just seen, you know, some people you just have to do it with all the time. So yeah, anyway. So I think we need to go across to the other calm guy in the group, and that's Edward. So Edward, respond or react?
Yeah, my initial reaction was to sort of say whatever would wind Trevor up the most. But then I thought, no, behave, and I decided to provide a considered answer. It's interesting what you're saying about complaining, because we've got a telecoms provider in the UK, BT, absolutely useless at customer service. And one time I got really annoyed with them. So I put a load of jokes about them on Twitter. And within a couple of hours, someone phoned me back and said, I'm not your normal customer service person. I haven't got a target. I can listen to your complaint all day until I resolve it. So Twitter's the place to go to do that. But I think, you know, reactions are very useful because, you know, they allow us to do things quickly. You think about it, if you put your hand on the hot plate, you don't want to think, oh, that's hot. I wonder what I should do about it. Maybe I should move my hand. How do I move my hand? You want to take your hand away very quickly. But I think most of those reactions were wired into us. Well, actually, many of them were wired into us before we even evolved as a species. And they're not appropriate. You think about the freeze, flight, or fright reaction. Great if you're a wildebeest being attacked by a lion. Not so good if you've got an IT problem. You just get wound up and start shouting at people over the telephone. And Lee mentioned motoring, and I've thought about an accident I almost had. I was driving along and I was going around a large roundabout. I think you guys call them circles, and you don't have many of them. But I was going around a large roundabout, and this lady came in from the left without giving way. She just went straight on the roundabout. And I kind of realized she was going to do that. So I was braking gently with the intention of going behind her. And she suddenly realized what she'd done and just braked and stopped dead right in front of me. So I had to apply rather a lot of pressure to the brake, and I stopped within inches of her door. And of course, she was then in a panic. And of course, she stalled the car when she braked. And then she sort of didn't know what to do. So she froze for a while. And then the guy behind started honking his horn. She tried starting the car. It was in gear, so it stalled again. And then the whole thing escalated. Of course, you know, had she just used the right response in the first place and just kept on going, none of it would have happened. But of course, when she stopped and froze, that was the wrong reaction. And when the guy behind started honking his horn, he was in fight mode. But of course, he couldn't fight. All he could do was honk his horn. That made her panic and freeze more. And the whole situation got out of hand. Now, when I drive, and I don't drive very often now because I've given up using my car for environmental reasons, I never get upset with anyone. You can carve me up, you can do whatever you like, you can wave two fingers at me. I'm most relaxed, because when we allow those primitive reactions to happen, yes, Trevor, I can see you. All that happens is loads of chemicals wash around our body. And when we were wildebeest, we used to run off and escape the lion, and all those chemicals will disappear. But when you're driving your car angry at someone that's pulled out in front of you, they've got nowhere to go. And you're just building up a heart attack for the future. So whenever I drive, and I used to drive a lot, about 40,000 kilometers a year, I was as relaxed as anything but concentrating. And I think we have got a lot of those legacy systems wired into us. And I was listening to a fascinating talk once about why we are, well, I lost the word for it, why we treat people who are different badly. Discriminatory, that's the word I wanted, discriminatory. And in the animal kingdom, if an animal just starts behaving oddly, the herd will disown it or move away from it. In fact, it was the original social distancing. Because what's happening is when an animal starts behaving strangely, it's because it's ill. And the herd want not to catch the illness, so they shun it. And they're arguing that's the basis for our discriminatory action against perhaps people that are different because they've got a different religion, different way of life. Maybe they've got either mental or physical impairments. And therefore our prejudice is almost a legacy system designed to protect us from illness. And I think, you know, it's so deep, we don't realize that's happening. And we need to overcome that. And we don't know what that legacy wiring is. So I think, yeah, reactions are really good, but we just need to make sure that we're using the right reaction at the time. And that if we do have those basic instinct reactions, we don't let them overwhelm us. Otherwise, it's going to damage our health. So that's my thoughts. And Lee, I generally think women drivers are very good. There's no difference between a woman driver and a man driver.
Ed, what happened to that PC language that you always so on about? You know, these non-binary relationships in terms of motor vehicles and their drivers and things of that like. But yeah, so reactions are all good except when they're bad.
Yeah, I generally think all drivers are bad except me.
Yeah, there you and Jeff have a commonality. So disrespect everybody equally to start off with. All right, good stuff. Okay, so Scotty, react or respond?
Yeah, well, following Lee's story, my son Cam has now been 4 days in a row, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, every day. He went to the licensing department to get his license done. The first day he got there, it was closed. Then he went online to see which licensing departments were open at which at postal places. Day 2 he went, he was 4:05 because it closes at 5, but the licensing department closes at 4. Day number 3 he went, something else went wrong, I can't remember what, and then he went on day 4. He finally got there, everything was done, and they told him that he wasn't allowed to do it. He had to bring his mom. His mom had to do it. So somehow he's managed to retain his calm and composure. I lose the plot. I totally, utterly lose the plot when that happens. So yes, so I think millennials do have a bit, yeah, maybe they can teach us a lesson too, but I'll lose it. Another reaction that's taking place at the moment, did the Coca-Cola story hit South Africa? I'm sure it must have. The whole racial thing, interesting. So Coca-Cola did a presentation that got all their employees to watch it about being white. You guys have to see this. It literally says you're not allowed to be white anymore. And they leaked it. They leaked this thing. They did this whole thing, and it's gone on social media. And now obviously Coca-Cola employs huge numbers of public relations companies to stop social media frenzies and to twist it in their favor. You talk about how Coca-Cola is reacting to this whole thing. Really, really interesting. Here, let me quickly show you. This is literally what the Coca-Cola presentation to their employees says. Hey, look, there's Lee. Nice photo, Lee. This is literally the PowerPoint presentation that was leaked by their... So try to be less white. In the US and other Western nations, white people are socialized to feel they are inherently superior because they are white. Research shows that by age 3 to 4, children understand that it is better to be white. To be less white is to be less oppressive, less arrogant, less certain, less defensive, less ignorant. Be more humble, listen, believe, break with apathy, break with white solidarity, confronting racism, understanding what it means to be white, challenging what it means to be racist. This is literally straight from their thing. So this is going ballistic, as you can imagine, on social media. There's things about boycotting Coca-Cola now. And it's really, really interesting how this whole thing is kind of just getting blown out of proportion. But I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. But watching Coca-Cola trying to react to this has become quite interesting because they're in a situation where they're trying to be diverse, but at the same time, now they're becoming isolating themselves. So I'd be fascinating to see what you guys think. Maybe, I don't know, Ed, is it hit the UK, the story?
No, I haven't seen it yet. I'll have a look later.
Very interesting how the media are doing what they do a lot. They do a good job of trying to suppress stuff as well, but trying not to let the story get too out of control. But yeah, guys, you look at the reactions that are taking place at the moment, and I've made a conscious effort here in Bali to try and be just react differently to circumstances, because that knee-jerk reaction can be very angry in a lot of ways. And I've been working really hard on just trying to take things a bit calmer and in my stride. Yes, I don't know, the women that I know in my life, it's not about quality of driving, but boy, oh boy, do they get angry behind that wheel of that car. Woo!
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, from drivers to Coke and back again. So yeah. Jasper, which side of the wheel do you keep your Coke on?
I wasn't sure what direction this morning will take, and I think one can revisit this topic tomorrow and come out with a whole new angle. But since we are on driving, I was reminded of an incident about 2 years ago. Now, I'm fairly tolerant about most things and can absorb stress and stuff like that. But then when I reach that tipping point, I become a new person. And the day started off, my wife and I was going on an overseas trip, and we had to get our visas done. But the place where we had to get our visas done was in Pretoria. So we set out the morning to travel to Pretoria. When we got there, the normal stuff, you sit in queues and it's a long thing. And eventually when we're in front of the official, they said, no, this a bank account has to be original and stamped by the bank. So we just pulled it off from the what do you call it, the internet. But so that meant I had to go back to Johannesburg, go to the bank and get it stamped. So I kept my, accepted it as I have to do this now. So when we got back, I immediately went to Four Ways, to the bank, got it stamped. And as I got back from Four Way, I was in Four Ways crossing. So for the sake of Ed, who doesn't know where Four Ways is, but I had to, so it's literally, here's a freeway, and this side of the freeway is the four-way crossing, and that side of the freeway is the Four Ways big mall. And I had to cross the street, this big William Nicol Road, to just get to do some shopping. So all is still well, but then crossing the street, there's a congestion of traffic always. I was in there's a left lane and a middle lane and a right lane. So I'm in the middle lane, crossing the street, and next to me is a little car with a Chinese woman in it driving, and next to her a man, and in front of her a taxi. And as we enter this intersection of this very busy street, in this busy intersection, the taxi just stopped to offload the passenger. And this woman driver instinctively tried to get out of this accident that's going to happen. I could see it, you know, all slow motion. I could see it happening. And the next moment, I just hear on the side of my car. And then the taxi got his passenger and drove off. And then, you know, me and this other car stopped, just crossed, and we stopped on the side of the road. And I was still cool, but just the unfairness of this whole thing, of this taxi driver driving off, and I've got now for further 30,000 damage to my car, which was totally unnecessary, on top of the bank, on top of everything. Now it's a small little Chinese lady, and I tower over her, and I went to actually do the normal things like, you know, get me your license and we'll sort it out with insurance. But as I stood in front of her, I just disappeared, and the new me came up, and I just said, and I was just going on, and this poor lady, bewildered, what happened? Sorry. I said, it's not you, but and I found myself totally out of control. So it was a part of me standing outside of me, laughing at me, but this me couldn't help himself. And after about 5 minutes ranting and raving, got a license and got pictures. As I drove off, a part of me was, and then the next moment, I just found myself. So this feeling of call it emotional spillover. It will probably have a good name for it. Some sort of biological reptile thing in your mind that is just suppressed or whatever. But yeah, I think if we want to, so that was me reacting. So you don't want me to react. But I think the positive is if in this kind of forums and the business chats that we have, we can look at life and we can more or less get ourselves mentally prepared so that when stuff happen or before stuff happen, we have responded. And part of my thing with going to licensing departments and stuff like that, rather pay someone to stand in a queue for me than to do it myself, because I know my, my ability to contain myself in those situations becoming thinner and thinner. But yeah, that's me for the day.
Thanks, Jasper, a tall man with a short fuse. Yeah, it's interesting how some things just trigger us and set us off. So yeah, and yes, we were pleased to know that Zoom was doing some dynamic editing of your story there, because you know, you were cut out at some key points every now and again. So obviously the AI is working well on Zoom. All right, so Trevor, over to you.
So I'm a short man with a long fuse.
How are you? What is that? Oh, I didn't hear that.
Right? Yeah. And so now you've knocked me completely off track. I was going to give something deep, but I haven't got a clue. I think this was about choice and what comes of it. But I'm going to roll back a little bit because this week Ed reintroduced me again to status quo. And it's been quite interesting to actually follow through on the progression and stories of these guys as they've got older. So that link that I put up at the top might be interesting for everyone because this guy, Francis Rossi, who I never knew at all, turned 70 last year. And his journey through status quo was a series of choices because in the late 60s and early 70s, they got into drugs and did the Viv Brown thing. Oh, by the way, we must almost be a year since Viv Brown was tragically murdered. And I was reminded of Viv through sex, drugs, and rock and roll because that's what status quo was all about, and they were Ed's heroes clearly. But the story of this guy And just listening to him at 70, talking about elements of his life and having a look at the book that he's written. And I love the title of his book. It's called I Talk Too Much. Ed, so I don't know if you followed through. I also saw that in 2014, they did an LP, which was completely off the rock and roll track. It was an acoustic LP called Aquasonic or something to that effect. Get onto it. It's quite fantastic. But choices that people make, the wrong roads that they go down, how other people actually criticize the choices that you actually make. And at the end of the day, at 70 years of age, it's lovely to hear what he says. In his mind, he turns around and says, man, he wakes up every morning and he says, okay, what am I going to do now? Where am I going to go perform? At 70, he's planning where to perform. And then he reminds himself that he's 78. He might drive the car down the road and might not get to the venue, is the sort of thing that he talks about. So to me, it's an indication that life tends to be very fickle, and we tend to get too deep about it. And that maybe what we should be doing is just calming ourselves down and thinking about, okay, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. What should I be doing? 1, 2, 3. And by the way, I was thinking of my wife. I must say that she tries to educate all taxi drivers when she's driving early in the morning. Trying to teach them how to count to 1, basically when they cut in front of her. And I also remember her, I've never started a fight in my life. I just want you all to know this. But my wife has started all 3,221 of them, of which I won 1, I think. And I remember her, we went camping. With a rugby mate of mine, and we went off, and I think it was in the Eastern Transvaal in those days, and there was a bunch of rowdy youngsters. We must have been old, about 36 or 37, I think, with our little kids. And these rowdy youngsters were in a whole circle of tents. It was at Loskop Dam, so this will tell you something. And we were having a few Coca-Colas, and my wife started flipping a few rocks and stones at their tents. Listen, you don't want to pick on my wife. And it started fermenting a little bit, because those guys weren't drinking Coca-Cola. And then the two of us from Natal started having a go. And all of a sudden, my wife stirring the pot, these guys sort of rocked up at the gate, 22 Northern Transvaal under 20 rugby players who were out for the weekend at Loskop. So that was one of the little fracas that we did not win, but it was a fun day. And so you have the choices. Do you argue your way out of these things, or do you say, fuff, fuff? And which is, obviously Jasper was calling for Fuff to come and sort out all his problems at that street. Choices. In all seriousness, I was thinking seriously about this, Lee, and I was thinking about those poor folk like Madeleine McCann. I talked about her, and these kids that are being hijacked and taken away and spirited away, while we're actually talking the privilege of having choices, and turning around and saying people like Viktor Frankl. I thought we have to be sensitive to those that are stuck and too young to actually have the power of choice to be pulled away. So I suppose we can't be insensitive to their plight. So as usual, I'm completely confused as to how to think about, do people have freedom of choice, or do others take away their freedom of choice? Oops.
I'm her yesterday man. We're all friends, that's what I am.
Are you trying to tell me to stop?
Choice was yesterday's topic, Trevor. Yeah, so anyway. React or respond, you can choose which way you want to go, and Trevor always chooses which way he wants to go, regardless of what the topic might be. So yeah, as it says, I think Trevor, you're up on Monday morning, you can choose the direction of the chat, and then we'll take it from there. But okay, it's been a long week, obviously.
Well, I actually do have a topic that I was thinking about coming out of today, because what I was thinking about is the person on the other end of the phone that is getting the onslaught of our accumulated frustrations, and thinking of them as firefighters, and so I'd love to ask for just to think about firefighters on Monday, and what it is that they go through and have to deal with in order, and it came out of Scott's conversation as well, is that here you've got an organization that has a fire that has the potential of going wild, and how do you manage that fire? And so whether that's the fire within, the fire that you are getting from others, how do you fight fires? So let's talk about that on Monday.
Great, thanks, Lee. So again, have a great weekend. Fight fire with fire, or perhaps not.
Or just go into the dark, Scott.
Yeah, Scott's going back to bed.
Yeah, he's switched off all the lights. So yeah. All right, have a great one, folks. Have a good weekend, and yeah, if we don't see you at 9 o'clock, we'll see you next Monday, or on Monday, not next Monday, on Monday at 8 o'clock. Have a good one. Cheers.
Right.